trying to wash us away. Oh, Louisiana.
You know what I love about a college football coach? When he's not boring, when he doesn't give you that BS talk, when he speaks his mind, and occasionally will give you a quote that years from now you'll remember. That might describe what Les Miles is partially all about. Of course, I know that he's just not all about quotes. His record at LSU speaks for itself. A national championship back in 2007, and a national championship appearance 4 years later, and 2 SEC championships. Les Miles, took over from where Nick Saban had left off, and has made LSU still a program that you better bring your A game when it comes to playing them. Even though last year they fell a little bit, going 8-5, which by LSU standards is really below average. And it rarely happens. Yeah, they hadn't had a season like that since 2008, the year after they won the national title. But the thing I really love about Miles, besides the fact that he's one heck of a coach, he will give you stuff to remember him by. Of course, people in the Sooner State remember him when he was coaching at Oklahoma State University in Stillwater after those Bedlam games. A couple of quotes, for example, is, we'll take on any sucker out there. Or, of course, let her rip. Stuff like that. Les Miles, a guy who knows how to wear his ball cap straighter than I do, he definitely has a tough pedigree and grit for coaching college football, and they still do one hell of a job of recruiting even after they lose underclassmen to the NFL. It seems like they are in reloading mode. So you might be saying, well, what happened last year then? Why didn't they have at least a double-digit winning season? In which, when LSU doesn't contend for the national title, they'll still pull a 10-3 and still have that as their record. And, most programs would take that in a heartbeat. Last year was 8-5. So what happened? I think for the most part, quarterback play finally caught up to them, or lack of quarterback play. And this was surprising because Cam Cameron is the offensive coordinator, but also, too, he specializes in QBs. And last year, Anthony Jennings or Brandon Harris, which one stood out as having terrific quarterback play? In my opinion, neither one. They combined for a completion percentage of about 50%, and that won't get the job done, especially in the SEC West. Which, apologies to the Pac-12 South, SEC West is the best division in college football. We know that because last year all 7 of those teams went to a bowl game, and by the way, 3 of those teams went to major bowls, including Alabama going to the first ever college football semifinal playoff. So that speaks for itself. And LSU had a 4-4 conference record in 2014. Quarterback play must get better. In 2013, LSU 3,203 yards, and of course, I know Zach Mettenberger wasn't the greatest quarterback in the history of football, but at least he was productive in 2013, and at least he was a 6th-round draft pick last season in 2014. So did we think that his shoes were going to be that big to fill? At first, I didn't think so. But then when you look at how LSU threw the ball last year, 50% completions and only 2,118 yards total in 2014, there's a big problem there. So the development of Anthony Jennings, who looks like will be around despite the fact that he had some legal issues during the offseason with unlawful entry, but it looks like the student that was involved in that is not going to press charges. So to say Jennings is lucky is an understatement. If it's not Jennings, then we'll see Brandon Harris. Both athletic quarterbacks, and I think both have the talent, but when it came to execution, there was a serious problem with that. There just wasn't much at all. So for Jennings and for Harris, whoever they decide to start, they've got to be much better than last season. The receivers, I do think highly of Travis Durrell, 758 yards receiving, 7 TDs last year for the Bayou Bengals. And then Malachi Dupree, you might remember this guy 2 years ago, one of the more highly touted recruits in the country, and now he's entering his sophomore year. And don't be surprised, too, if Davey Clapp, a freshman, gets involved as far as receiving. Running back, one of the most talented in the country in Leonard Fournette. You might remember, speaking of highly touted recruits, part of that 2014 class, he was the #1 running back in the country, prep-wise. And again, a year ago, 1,034 yards and 10 TDs. Expected to be better this year. This guy, I absolutely love the way he's able to break tackles just by pushing those legs, by refusing to go down. One of those blue-collar type running backs, but also, too, has plenty of speed to go with it, backing up Darrell Williams. And we could see David Dupree as a freshman play at fullback. By the way, he's a true freshman. Several linemen come back for LSU, and there's lots of experience there. And we're talking about the play of Vidal Alexander. 2012, 3 years ago, he made the freshman All-American team as a tackle. They moved him to guard. He's 6'6", 340. I'll be curious, LSU fans, if you know he's going to be a guard or a tackle, let me know, because the research I've done, it has him listed as both, and I can't really get a clear-cut read on where LSU is going to start him. He can play both, though. That's an advantage. Left tackle, Gerald Hawkins, and then at tight end, Dylan Gordon, and Ethan Posick, you'll have him at left guard. But the center, that'll be an experienced spot right there. We'll see how LSU does. At least if the passing game can get going, and I have major doubts about that, defensively, defense should be able to help out. A year ago, Tigers only gave up 18 points per game. Okay, that was one of the best averages in the country. Okay, top 10 average in the country out of 128 teams. They did this despite the fact that they didn't really get a pass rush going. They had 7 sacks against Sam Houston State. You take away that game, though, which was against an FCS opponent, only 12 sacks against the other 11 teams. You kidding me? I mean, this is LSU. Come on, there's 4 or 5-star talent on this team, and they only managed 12 sacks against the other 11 opponents. Come on. They know they're better than that. And the thing about LSU entering the 2014 season, they do lose underclassmen from last year's team to the NFL, but not as many. I mean, they lost, I want to say, 7 the year before that and 11 in 2013. They lost 4 from this past team, 3 of them on the defensive side, 1 per layer. They lose a defensive end, Daniel Hunter. He'll be missed. He's with the Vikings, 3rd-round pick. But up front, a couple of tackles return in the form of Christian McCoucher and also to Davin Gottschalk. So you have experience, but the defensive ends going to be a little bit raw. Tashawn Bauer, he's going to have a lot of pressure on him to try and get to that QB. The linebackers, well, you're going to miss out on Kawan Alexander, 4th-round draft pick from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So who can step in as far as linebacker? Well, Kendall Beckworth, probably the best defensive player on this team. Maybe the busiest from last year, as he was the leading tackler coming back entering 2015. So you have his experience, and Lamar Lewis at strong side linebacker. Secondary does lose a valuable player in Jalen Collins, 2nd overall or 2nd round pick, beg your pardon, to the Atlanta Falcons. But most of the secondary does return, and you're going to have a very valuable player coming back in Tre'Davious White. This guy will be in the NFL one day. He's that good. And you also have Ed Parks on the other corner. And the safeties look solidified there with Jamal Adams as a strong safety. Free safety is Jalen Mills. Remember LSU secondary last season, they only allowed 10 TD passes and, by the way, got 10 interceptions. You'll take that any day of the week. I think they're the best secondary in the SEC. But, again, they have to show they get a pass rush. And I think the biggest loss that this team had was that of the defensive coordinator in John Chavis. He was Mr. Productive, putting together some great defenses throughout this decade. He goes now to Texas A&M. Hey, A&M's going to pay him $1.7 million per year. He's got work to do at College Station, but it'll be interesting to see what happens at the end of the year when these two teams play each other at Baton Rouge. Be a bit of a homecoming for Chavis. Schedule for LSU, September doesn't really look all that bad except for one game. First 2 games, McNeese State, and you go to Mississippi State. The Bulldogs, though, are in rebuilding mode, even though they return the quarterback. But LSU, very well could be 2-0, hosting Auburn. Last year, the Tigers won this game by 5 touchdowns. Wasn't even close. Got to go to Syracuse. That'll be a trick game, but one that LSU should win. And in October, Eastern Michigan, the Hurons, come to Baton Rouge, and then you go to South Carolina. South Carolina's in rebuilding mode, too. You host Florida, Western Kentucky after that. So you could be 7-1 entering the month of November, and this is where the schedule, I think, catches up with LSU. All 4 of those games they could lose. You go to Alabama, and then you see the last 3 games there. A&M's interesting because, again, that's John Chavis, who knows the LSU staff like the back of his head. That will be a tough game for LSU, even though I know the Tigers have beaten A&M every year since the Aggies joined the SEC. That's still going to be major tough because Chavis knows LSU schemes, he knows their patterns, and he knows the personnel. So this will be A&M's best shot, even though it's a road game for the Aggies, to try to beat LSU. Again, I think the Tigers secondary will be solid, and I think the running game will be good, but the passing game has to show. It has to show they can't, again, be dead last in the SEC in passing. That won't do it. That's a big reason why they didn't get double digits in wins. Until they get this area taken care of, and until they can get pressure on the QB, I know it's LSU, but I still think they're going to be in for a bit of a mediocre year. I think the 2016 team, though, because as young as LSU is, will be back in contention, but not this year. 7-5 overall, 3-5 in the SEC West. That's my look at the Tigers. We'll see you later.